Welcome to the next edition of Fridays with Fintelekt. My guest today is Antoine Karam, who heads the software products for member states at the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, UNODC. Most of you in the AML CFT space or working with FIUs and regulators would be aware that this unit is responsible for the goAML software for the UNODC member states, and goAML, I believe, has become the sort of de facto software of choice for FIUs around the world. Antoine, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Fridays with Fintelekt. And at the outset, may I request you to introduce yourself, say a few words, and also maybe briefly touch upon your professional career in the world of AML CFT so that our listeners can get to know you better personally.
Yes, thank you, Shirish. Thank you very much for having me. As you said, I'm heading right now the software products for member states section at UNODC, which deploys intelligence software to operationalize the mandate to fight crime and financial crime and all sorts of illicit drug trafficking and other mandates of UNODC. In terms of myself, I am in this position for a year and a bit right now. I joined this unit 4 or 5 years ago in various capacities, managing the implementations, managing the communicating with the member states. Well, before that, I have a long experience in deployments of software, deployments of ERPs, and replacement of softwares at the UN and in the public sector in the beginning of my career. There's also a project that I have done where I had the opportunity to travel to all a very large number of UN organizations to try to establish and harmonize the business practices in terms of ICT services and how to establish a costing structure and strategy. I have a computer engineering degree, a bachelor and a master's, and I'm right now doing a doctorate in machine learning. So that would be what the introduction about myself.
Thanks, Antoine. So Antoine, getting on to goAML and UNODC, can you give us, a brief history of goAML? Why did the UNODC develop it initially, and what have been some of the key achievements or milestones over the last few years?
goAML was initially developed because the EFCC, which is the FIU of Nigeria, required a software to do the analysis of their reports and to be able to have a dissemination tool, actually. So our country office in Nigeria took over this project as part of a larger project anti-corruption inside the country and initiated the first version that was in 2006, 2007. After that, countries started to follow. A milestone was the Netherlands, which implemented it in Europe as the first country in Europe very soon after. And requirements started to grow. One country after the other continued adding requirements on it. And it became more and more, as you know, a software that was adopted as de facto. And you have today the large numbers of countries. You have today in 57 countries that are using it or have agreements with us to deploy it. And the number is growing. We had a few countries even during the lockdown signed with us. It has a very large, one very big milestone of the last year was crossing the 100,000 users in the financial intelligence sector, which is quite significant. In the life of the project, a very important milestone was the General Assembly resolutions. You have resolution 66177, 66181. You have one which is the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice resolution, number 233. It's important because this one actually mentions goAML itself as an Economic Council resolution. These all are the building blocks that were very important milestones for goAML to become what it has become today and the mandates to become official. The product has grown a lot and has become it has an official governance structure. Something important to mention is that the countries are an equal partner or are actually the drivers of this software. We have a governance, we have a user community with internet platforms and frequent meetings and a chair. The chair right now is Germany, and there is a vote going on right now for the next chair. We have, so this user community drives the development of the product and drives the strategy and the future visions. Which is quite an important structure in place. What more can I say? I think an important one is as well the in terms of milestones. Well, the impact of goAML in the world would be one that is worth saying. For example, when a country is taken off the FATF grey list, for example, because largely or due partly to a goAML implementation, because as you know, there are 40 indicators in the mutual evaluations, and many of them touch on intelligence system, an electronic system. That is something that we find very motivating. This happened this year. A very important country for goAML is Iceland, and the amount of work and what this FIU has done in the last year or two has been phenomenal. And they did an implementation and they went live with the software during the lockdown. Although this is the new normal, we have other countries going this month live with the software during the lockdown. And this allowed them to, this helped in being taken off in October or a few months before, but from the greatest. Other examples exist around the same like Tunisia and some other countries have benefited very much from these implementations in terms of their status with the FATF, which, as you know, is a regulatory body that has a very powerful and important, it's an important reference in terms of everything related to FAUs, of course, obviously. One last word in terms of milestones, I would say sometimes we hear, now these are very confidential things, we don't receive this information, but you, over the years, you're able to tell or somehow are able to know that how goAML was used. So there are many examples. A child pornography ring was actually identified thanks to the financial transactions inside goAML, and then FIU was able to analyze this. There are many other examples. There was a seize of $66 or $67 million a few years ago by another country, and of course all these things are very confidential because you know, the FIUs, they receive these reports, they push them for dissemination to the law enforcement, and then law enforcement opens a case, and when they end up with a conviction, law enforcement does not necessarily or does not ever inform the FIU of what was done and what methodology was used for the FIU to, and then the FIU does not tell us as well, are not very interested in telling us secrets about their methodology, and that is absolutely fine. However, after 13 years, there are some very few cases that you kind of like either find out or hear of, very indirectly, and all based on rumors, obviously. So basically, that's what I would say in terms of the history of this product. Yes.
Right. Thanks, Antoine. So, Antoine, you know, what are the reasons that an FIU would actually consider implementing goAML as compared to developing their own software?
I would say, well, the advantages of goAML is because it is deployed in that many countries, and most importantly, the most important is that it has benefited from years and years and millions of dollars of R&D in the development of the software, business requirements that came directly from FIUs over all those many years. And it has benefited from economies of scale that are absolutely drastic. Countries are paying, if you compare to the private market, countries are paying between $40,000 or $60,000 or $80,000 a year. Some special releases with we call this the enterprise edition, which has a large number of customized modules, does not cost more than a few $100,000 to $300,000 a year. If you consider what you're getting with this product, this is possible because of many flexible costing arrangements and many a very good funding structure that has benefited from economies of scale. So we are a very large team here, but over the years and with this number of subscribers, we are extremely cheap. Also, there's a lot of benefit of having a system that is being used by countries neighboring you and countries around you. There is a general harmony here, there's a general common understanding. Sometimes FIUs have to build themselves around the software or change the way they work and change the software. So there's kind of like a certain harmony. Maybe one day even, but this is a very utopic, but having FIUs share information, because if you think that there is about 700 or 800 by now million suspicious transactions at goAML, all the databases of the world, this is based on what we do as surveying, because this is all confidential information that we don't have access to. But these estimates indicate that the power of goAML is undescribable. If you were to tap into, with the latest technologies of AI, if you were to tap into these millions of transactions, there are trends that one would never even be able to think, and that a software can be able to see in these transactions. Of course, this is very complicated, last point here, because the FIUs themselves are very guarding justifiably of their data, and this is not something that they would be sharing easily with any other country, their neighbors or whatever. However, the opportunity would have been there in a very governed way to have some kind of exchange information from a goAML instance to another. But that is another discussion, of course.
Antoine, coming to implementation, what type of handholding do FIUs and also the rest of the ecosystem players, let's say law enforcement agencies and private sector entities, require while implementing goAML in a particular country? You mentioned that you deal with 57 FIUs and more than 100,000 users around the world. So how does your team provide the support?
Well, support is, we had to adapt. We had to have a scalability strategy here. You have to have a model where things that can be done at once to many FIUs at once in the webinars or trainings have to be done. We have to now benefit from this new normal, which also has changed a lot the way that we work, using generalized large-scale webinars to do the requirement specifications of the software, to do the training, to do the support. We have, before the lockdown also, that's very important, we have an infrastructure team that is deploying the software and configuring it and maintaining things at the infrastructure level. And they are working every day, all day, because as you say, the number of countries, when it grows, this is an ongoing job forever. So this is what we are doing to be able to address the large task. Trainings with the new normal are being done constantly. Something that used to take 2 weeks takes right now 8 weeks or 7 weeks. And we're doing 3-4 countries at once. Our trainers are all we have a large team that with many capacities, and those who are doing training are training, let's say 3 times a week, one country to the other 2 days, another country, and they do this over many months, and the countries come and go and start and finish. When you do this with 3-4 people, you're able to achieve quite a large number. However, this is still a process. It was a very big change. We used to travel to these countries, spend 2 weeks and be done. Today we're doing this remotely, which is also a very good lesson. In terms of the implementation, I would like to say a word. The implementation of goAML is actually quite a long one, and it's something that takes about 1 year to sometimes up to 1.5 to 2 years. You have several phases, and for this reason, it's a project that is on the long haul that requires attention and investment and effort and a bit of a transformation from the FIU. The more they invest effort in this, the more they are. And so the basic phases are just the initial assessment, the pre-production phase. Then this is where we train the IT staff on how to configure the software. They would go for a few months and do a customization phase and work with their banks, work with the legislative bodies and the reporting entities to define how the reports need to look like, what needs to be reported. And then once this whole customization phase finishes, about 4 or 5 months later, then we provide the production training, which is allowing the software to finally, the FIU to finally go live with the software. And then this is where the LEAs come into play. We have national cooperation modules, external system services, which is a module of goAML, contains goIntel and other abilities to exchange information with law enforcement and intelligence databases, bring back information into goAML or send information once there are matches. And this requires, of course, another project in itself, and that would be the phase 2 of our goAML implementations that involve, we start with piloting 2-3 LEAs, and then it goes on and on, depending on the infrastructure of the country, the national agreements, the MOUs between them, and so. So this is what happens basically with an implementation.
Right. And Antoine, I understand that you categorize FIUs by size and some other parameters for deployment of this, of a suitable goAML architecture. So how is this done, and what are the challenges that are associated with onboarding a country to adopt goAML?
Okay. Yes, indeed. There are indeed a lot of different profiles of countries. So basically what we do here is we have about 5 or now up to 7 different infrastructure standards. From the most high level SAN to SAN replication, extremely expensive and very advanced infrastructure using all sorts of the latest technologies, we are able to adapt to that. This is for FIUs that have huge governmental data centers and that typically for nations that are quite with a high GDP per capita or very. So this is the kind of implementation that we would do, and we until the most simple implementation, which is a much more rugged and simple infrastructure design. All these are documented, and we hold the hand of the countries in this implementation. These designs, when you have a country that does not have a very good infrastructure or the ability to have extreme advanced skills locally, not necessarily true. It's not the people usually, it's more the infrastructure that is the problem. We have some of the best experts we've seen would be in countries where the infrastructure is the problem. And we need, in such a country, you cannot deploy a large infrastructure with automated VMware and auto-sensing data centers and this sort of thing. It has to be extremely rugged. Sometimes installations can take place here and the whole thing would be shipped from here. It's mostly based on firewalls for security, because security is the most important strategic direction always. So it's mostly based on much more common and simple elements for this to run, because goAML is based on known technologies. And that would be the infrastructure design that we would recommend, and that we would train and continue to help the country in deploying. So that would be the strategy, basically.
Right. So some of our listeners and part of the Fintelekt community are private sector professionals from countries that are already in various stages of implementation of goAML. We often hear them speak about challenges such as additional data requirements, lack of budgets for technical enhancements, KYC challenges, and other issues. What is your advice to banks and financial institutions to gear up for reporting to their country FIU through goAML?
Well, the reality is that the legislation is the most important one. So basically, we do not dictate what data needs to be provided to the FIU. This comes straight from the legislation. And also, the reporting entities have a very long chance to communicate with their FIU in workshops during the customization phase on what needs or what can be done, or what can be improved, or what can be made better or easier. So the custodian of the relationship with the FIU, with the reporting entities, is the FIU, because for us we have, like, in general, there's like about 80,000 reporting entities in goAML right now. So we are not. It is the responsibility of the national entity, which is the FIU, to inform, to train, to do workshops. In terms of extra data, what I would say is, typically, if goAML is designed that it doesn't ask, particularly from banks, data that they don't already have. So this means that it's just a matter of having the right exporters. This can be done typically if sometimes just a consultant is recruited for a few weeks or a few months. The right exporters are taken from the systems of the bank, and they're automatically communicating with the APIs of goAML. My message to all of them would be that an effort in investment in the beginning will go a long way in the end. So automation and exporters are the way to go into goAML for anything that is systematic reports, cash transaction reports, UTR. Of course, another one is the more sensitive reports that have more text, like STRs. This shouldn't be automated. I mean, this can be as well, but typically I understand from my experience that quality benefits from manual, of course, intervention in terms of writing, of course, these analysis reports, and not being, you can't really automate these things. So another one that they need to have is a national cooperation strategy. So this is also because you're asking me about the challenges that they face. These are all challenges, and they are the building blocks of goAML. If you don't have a national cooperation strategy, if LEAs are not ready to communicate and there are no protocols between them, goAML will be very challenging. And simply the national arm, the national cooperation modules, which are phase 2, will simply not be deployed, or are deployed much later. So these are this is how you address these challenges that you mentioned. The legislation, the FIU, and of course, the FIU needs to have all the legislative abilities. I've been to places where, for example, tipping off is not a crime, of course, and there is a lot of things that legislations are missing in some countries. There are some countries where the FIU is mandated with this role, and then another entity is mandated with the same role, and you get 15 years of political nibbling on that with in the country. So I would say the legislation is something that we look at first when we used to travel to countries, and we make sure that it has the sufficient efficiency and the sufficient role is given for the FIU to act, maybe also to seize and freeze assets and things. So yeah, that would be my answer on this.
All right, one last question before we let you go. Something forward-looking. What would you say is the future roadmap for goAML, both in terms of technical enhancement as well as market penetration?
Yes, well, goAML there is everything. There's a lot of things going on with goAML, as I said, and so definitely the good thing is that technology is moving so quickly, and there is room to improve in a lot of directions. So, and this is what is happening right now. We're moving away, trying to move away as much as possible from the traditional models. Everything is becoming multi-tier. Everything is becoming lightweight. You have business intelligence and you have business logic that is separated and sitting in services outside the data. Architecture has changed today. You have Kubernetes, you have containerization. There's a lot of benefits that can be had. And so goAML is actually in continuity shifting. AI and machine learning are very easy to tap into today. Of course, these are buzzwords, but there's also, from my studies, there is a lot of low-hanging fruits, and also a complete overhaul with unstructured data. And so all these things we're very carefully looking at, and we're moving towards. This is the first year where we're rewriting very large components of the software. Last year we have deployed a new, complete new front end with different technologies completely, and that has been very well received. It's based on the requirements of the user community, of course, and the countries. But with technology and we have a very, very good opportunity that we're using to continue. Big data is the keyword here, and the ability to digest and all this and work at that level of performance while keeping security. This is, of course, the main one. That would be my my answer.
Right. What about market coverage, Antoine? I mean, from 57, what is the goal now?
Well, where do we go from there? You continue. We have all the neighbors of the neighbors are hearing about goAML, and they're contacting us. So we just signed an SLA last week with one country. We're working very closely with the Egmont Group, and we actually have our governance structure is actually a little bit mapped like the one of the Egmont Group very closely. This will only lead to further talks and further being useful to user community and continuing our coverage. As you know, the Egmont Group has 166 countries. Does that mean we will see 166 countries having goAML? Yes, we never know, but I wouldn't say that this is our objective. Our objective is to continue to do what they ask from us. We're at their service, and we're going to continue adding more countries. That is basically what happens.
Great. Antoine, thank you so much for joining us today. Pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.